The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
The man in Boston that they call JD. Could he be the next JT? Could he?
The next Justin Timberlake? What?
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks and also a Canucks writer currently with the Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we dive into today's episode, we got to thank you for tuning into Locked On Canucks because guess what? It is your Canucks every damn day. We're part of that Locked On Podcast Network, doing the most for sports fans across the world. And for our show, Locked On Canucks, if you haven't done so already, make sure you go subscribe or follow us for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, got to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on today to get started. Oh, Patrick Allvin, he is past being started, okay? The guy was spending some money. And Kyle, let me throw out a number to start the episode. Since the season ended for the Vancouver Canucks, Patrick Allvin has spent $136 million of Francesco Aquilini's money on signing either extensions or new players to the roster. All right, So let's get into the second biggest one. Phil Pronik was the biggest contract handed out since the end of the season. But let's get into the second biggest one, Jake DeBrusk, and Kyle had you covered yesterday. I was slacking off on Canada Day with the family. And I want to talk about this DeBrusk signing because I've been through a bit of a roller coaster of emotions myself with this. And I do want to talk about the potential comparison to Jake DeBrusk and JT Miller, who both joined the Canucks at similar ages. Whoa. We'll get into that. I'll also give some of my other grades on the free agents out there. And let's talk about the Canucks cap situation a bit. Are there more moves potentially to come for the Vancouver Canucks? Let's get into all that and more. But before we do that, let me introduce my co-host. He's not slacking off here. Kyle Bowen. How's it going, brother?
Not slacking off because Patrick Allvin will never slack off, man. This team still continues to be one of, if not the most entertaining team in hockey when it comes to just news. The news cycle never stops, man. The assumption, it never stops. The spending, it never stops. And what a phone call, okay? Trevor Beggs, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I forgot the time. It was just a random time in the day, in the morning. I was foggy. And this guy tells me that Jake DeBrusk just signed a 7-year deal with the Canucks. And my immediate reaction was, is this the next Ilya Mikheyev? It was early, okay? And then I slapped myself in the face and I realized that, man, oh man, not too long ago, I did say time in and time out that Jake DeBrusk is a good player. I just don't really want the Canucks getting him because all I wanted was Gensel. I wanted a needle pusher. Speaking of which, Trevor Beggs, man, we want to talk about diabolical phone calls, right? This guy's like, you know what, Kyle? I don't care what you do, or what your thoughts are, what your dreams are. On today's episode, we're talking about the hook. We're talking about comparing Jake DeBrusk to JT Miller, our needle mover. Oh, okay, so I'm going to get mad at you for even bringing up this comparison day one into Jake DeBrusk's life as a Vancouver Canuck because I feel as if it's a little disrespectful to JT, I'm not going to lie. And I just don't see the comparables, but I want to let you speak here, okay? Where are you seeing the comparables? Is this a Taka thing? Is this a look at the stats over the years? This guy's 27. JT Miller was 27 when he came over. Like, what's going on in that evil, dark mind of yours?
It's funny that you're calling it evil darkness. I think it's just hoping and dreaming. But you look at JT Miller and Jake DeBrusk, and I don't think you have to squint to see the similarities between the two players now. One big difference is JT Miller, even when he joined the Canucks, had spent some time at center, although he was primarily a left winger, could play his offside, much like Jake DeBrusk as well. But what we see with Jake DeBrusk, and similar to JT Miller, is that, both players were pretty good second-line wingers, right? Jake DeBrusk has proven in Boston over the past 3 years that, he's definitely elevated when he plays with better centers, and maybe not so good when he's with some lesser centers in the lineup, which was a big problem with the Boston Bruins. But you look at JT Miller in the last season before he got traded, or sorry, signed by Vancouver, or no, traded. Sorry, my bad. He had 13 that season. Last season with Tampa Bay, he had 13 goals, 47 points in 75 games.
Holy.
Okay, eerily similar numbers to what Jake DeBrusk did this season, where he had 19 goals, 40 points in 80 games. Okay, so both JT Miller and Jake DeBrusk, when they joined the Canucks, were coming off of somewhat down years, because the season before that, JT Miller had 58 points. Jake DeBrusk, the season before this, had 50 points, but he did so in 64 games. Pretty impressive stuff, to be honest.
How many goals did he have in that season too?
27 goals and 50. Yeah, exactly. So Jake DeBrusk was on a 30-plus goal pace. And that's kind of what when you sign a contract, this is what you're hoping for. You're kind of hoping for that 30 goals, 60 points, right? If he can provide that, he's doing his job.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the other thing too is, yeah.
They need that, bro. Because sorry to cut you off. I'm passionate right now. Continue.
I would say the other big thing with the two players is that, Jake DeBrusk, especially over the last couple of seasons, has become a more well-rounded defensive player. And that's something that I probably wasn't as astutely aware of when we were doing free agency predictions. But everything out of Boston, looking at some of the tape on this guy last night, I mean, he's a very responsible player. And he's added some penalty killing to his arsenal as well. So much like JT Miller, becoming a well-rounded player. So I think the big similarities are both, pretty physical wingers. Both have became more well-rounded coming to Vancouver. So JT Miller, again, he's been through a roller coaster since he's been here, but again, one of the best players in the NHL now. And both players got some skill for sure, but I think there's some untapped potential with Jake DeBrusk, much like there was in JT Miller at the time. So I think that's the big hope here, because my initial reaction to the deal was, dear God, why did they sign this guy for 7 years, $5.5 million? I thought it was a big, massive contract for Jake DeBrusk. And I think another reason why I didn't personally look at him too hard as an acquisition target is because I figured he's going to cost too much. And this is an expensive deal, in fairness, but the more I think about it, again, you're getting one of the youngest guys in free agency on a deal with a cap that's digestible. And again, they're banking on him maybe having a JT Miller like impact, maybe not to that level, but finding another gear with the Vancouver Canucks.
No, 100%. And, both these guys came to Vancouver after being in masterclass-like organizations, right? Tampa and Boston. Even for JT before he got to Tampa, he was in New York. Like, they got some well-coached guys who, quote-unquote, know what it takes. And this whole Jake DeBrusk thing, I think, again, when Trevor gives me the call, I feel like I'm all over the place. I feel as if it's not more of a knock on... It's not like completely a knock on DeBrusk. It's more of a knock on the expectation, right? We literally went from tier A to tier B in a matter of minutes. And tier B for us was always like Toffoli, even maybe like Tara Vinen. The name DeBrusk never, quote unquote, made sense here, aka was never talked about. So it was so surprising, was all over the place. All in all, though, like it's so easy to get knowledge on this guy or get expertise on this guy. It's free agent frenzy. Everyone's talking about it. And when you click all these clips from various people in the East talking about this move and talking about Jake DeBrusk, all you hear is he's a very good hockey player. Like, he's really good, especially in the playoffs. And Trevor, you touched on this, and this is something that JT Miller wasn't when he came to Vancouver. There's an element of a two-way player that shows very little cracks or inconsistencies in being that, a two-way player, a real pro here, a difference maker. Because again, if you're playing in the top six and you have that ability to skate and move your feet and play with PD and possibly have some chemistry, deliver some offense, but also bring that ability not to be a liability, it's a player that can be inserted into a lineup and give you something that helps that winning continue. Like, you get a guy that's going to help you make the playoffs. Speaking of which, great playoff performer. I've seen a lot of Boston Bruins games. They're always in the playoffs. They're always playing the Leafs. Jake DeBrusk brings it in the playoffs. He levels up. You know how we lost Lindholm and Zadorov? And those guys brought it up to another level in the playoffs? They replaced one of them with Jake DeBrusk.
Yeah, and I think the playoff point is really strong, Kyle. He led the Boston Bruins in scoring in this postseason, as I think most people already know. And in the year before that, he's got 4 goals in 7 games. That was second on the team as well. So, Jake DeBrusk is a guy that brings it. And again, I think the big knock on him is the consistency in his game.
Yeah.
And he's become a more well-rounded player, but he's a streaky scorer, right? And
Oh, yeah.
that's something that, I'm not expecting necessarily to change in Vancouver.
No,
it happens
come
to
on.
almost
Put
every
it
player
out
in the
there,
NHL.
Trevor.
But
Play the Hindu music. It's got to happen. He's got to be consistent. The time for this team to win is now. They're taking a shot with Jake DeBrusk. He's not Jake Ensel, but they kind of need him to evolve into a top 70, top 50 like player playing with Pedersen or Miller. Like the inconsistencies have to stop. There was this quote from like Pete Blackburn this morning. Like I'm paraphrasing, but Jake DeBrusk is either very good or very invisible.
Yeah. Well,
This
even
team
just
who-
it's funny looking at
Yeah.
his. I'm just looking at his splits this season, for instance. Right in October, he has 3 assists in 8 games, 6 points in 13 games in November, 7 points in 13 games in December. Then he has 6 goals, 9 points in January. February, a goal and an assist in 12 games, and he explodes in March, and then has just 1 goal in 7 games in April. So, I mean, he did battle a broken hand this season. But you look at the scoring, and that broken hand was like a season. He was all over the place, right? Again, no consistent center. This is an excuse now, but apparently he butted heads with Bruce Cassidy pretty hard when he was in charge. So, but again, like I said, you're signing a guy for 7 years, $5.5 million. I like the player. I've warmed up to the deal more since my initial negative reaction, but there's risk here for sure.
There's risk here. And before we get to the break, I got to bring this up too, if we're talking about the whole JT Miller comparable, right? And remember, JT Miller gets to the Canucks and he's coming off of like 47 points in whatever amount of games, right? Top 6 talent. He's not elite yet. Nobody has this idea of JT Miller being a 100-point player. If Tampa thought that was the case, they wouldn't have traded him. But what does JT Miller do on the wing when he comes to Vancouver? Most often, the case was that he was playing with Elias Pettersson. And that's going to be the exact same thing with Jake DeBrusk. And when Elias Pettersson is on and he's swaggy and he's dangerous and he's having fun and he's cerebral, dude, this guy makes everyone better around him. And I feel as if there's going to be obviously pressure on DeBrusk and Pettersson to get it done, but something tells me that it is going to work. Maybe that's the hippie in me, that maybe that's the Findu in me. Maybe that's it being 420 all the time in my life, but I feel like they got the raw tools to make it happen. And maybe, just maybe, there's a little Bertuzzi-Naslund thing happening here, okay? For real. Maybe, just maybe, there's Pettersson feeling more safe that he has DeBrusk around him. You know what I'm saying? Because there is that POS in Pettersson's game that gets him engaged in the game, right? Like, he has that snarly ability about him, and maybe it comes out more and he's engaged more because he knows he has DeBrusk behind him.
Man, oh man, I thought I was being optimistic, and then you just dropped a whole Bertuzzi-Naslund comparison talking about the Pettersson and DeBrusk. Man. Unbelievable,
man.
Kyle. Nice
go,
going,
man.
buddy. Nice
Let's
going.
go.
Speaking of going, let's get going to the other side, where let's rip through the rest of free agent signings. Because Kyle, you went solo yesterday. I want to get my takes on them. I got thoughts on all these guys. Okay, let's get to it on the other side after shouting at our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much, and I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up customers all summer with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Now, let me throw out some weird bets for you, okay? So for next season on FanDuel, you can bet which team is going to beat which opponent in the Stanley Cup final. And for the Vancouver Canucks, you can bet, like the first 4 teams to come up are, you can bet on them to beat the Florida Panthers at plus 11,000, the Carolina Hurricanes at plus 12,000, the New Jersey Devils at plus 13,000, and the Toronto Maple Leafs at plus 15,000. Holy guacamole. Whatever you're betting on, whatever you feel like doing when it comes to betting, make sure you go head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports partner of Major League Baseball.
People, we are back at the Don't Doze Art Lab doing this, and that's giving you an episode of Locked On Canucks, man. Man, oh man. every day something happening on this network. Every day the Canucks cooking up a storm, working the lines. Allvin, Rutherford, Tocchet, Foot, and Gonchar. They don't sleep. They don't sleep, and they don't want to take a step back. They really don't. And some people, yes, some people out in this world, Trevor Beggs, think that they did, right? Because you can make the argument that the ceiling of this team based on who they lost versus who they picked up, it's a little smaller, right? You lose Zadorov and Lindholm, two of your best 5 playoff players, 2 guys with some sort of pedigree as well, right? To their name. They got a little bit of swagger, right? You lose 2 of those guys and you replace Lindholm, quote unquote, with Jake DeBrusk, which kind of evens out, but then you replace Nikita Zadorov with Vincent Desharnais. Is it Desharnais or Desjardins? One of those names. And I get where people are coming from.
Yeah, so let's touch on the negative first, because I think there's a lot of good in what the Canucks did aside from Jake DeBrusk. Jake DeBrusk, again, sticker shock for me, but the more I think about it, it's a good deal for the Canucks, hopefully. But for me, the fatal flaw with the Canucks yesterday was what they did on their defense. And Kyle, everydayers know about it. We talked about it time and time again. We said, do not make Tyler Myers a priority. And I kind of want to ask you this in a second. If we're being too hard on Tyler Myers.
Ask me now, I'm feeling it. Ask me now.
Yeah, okay. Were we being too hard on Tyler Myers? Or is this guy supposed to be a second pairing right shot defenseman for your Vancouver Canucks?
I don't think we were being too hard on Tyler Myers. I just feel as if there was a part of us that felt as if that we were going to go into the season with this, with Tyler Myers being your 4th best defenseman. And I know there's more time in the offseason. There's more time to make moves, but I think you and I were both a little hesitant and a little scared of giving up more draft capital or prospect pool to fix that issue when you potentially had Nikita Zadorov feeling himself and falling in love with the city. And there's this notion that, and the facts that tell you that Zadorov is a 16 minutes per game type of guy, a guy that's maybe never gotten over 20 points, or like his offensive game is not consistent and all these jazz. Like he's a number 5, number 6 defenseman. You don't pay guys like that $5 million. But man, oh man, what if he isn't that guy? What if he is a top 40 man and you missed out on that? And again, you're going to start the season off with Tyler Myers and Carson Soucy being your number 2 pairing, which is, dude, that's like, you want to talk about structure. You want to talk about defense first. You want to talk about all that jazz and how the Canucks are that team now. I'm telling you, if they can't get the puck out of their zone, you can throw structure out the window. And right now, behind using Aronik and Soucy, you have 5 defensemen who are number 5 or number 6 or number 7 defensemen.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? You look at $3 million for Myers, $2 million for Desharnais. Let's just pick on these guys. Could you have not have just gotten another second pairing right shot defenseman and not signed those guys, right? And gone with Noah Juleson or another bargain bin option
or Sean Walker,
like Yanni Hakanpää. Sean Walker was the name that came to my mind, right? 5 years, under $4 million per season in Carolina. Alexander Carrier was another guy who went back to Nashville on a deal. I think it pays him $3.75 million a season. I mean, I get what the Canucks are trying to do, right? They want this big, physical, imposing blue line. But in today's NHL, that only means so much if those guys can't get the puck out of their zone. Mm-hmm. And with Tyler Myers, I mean, I don't know. Canucks media, I think, is just like falling in love with this guy too. Like everything I read about Tyler Myers is pretty positive because he's a likable guy. He's a good interview. But it's like he had his best season as a Canuck, don't get me wrong, but the bar was so low. And now you're penciling this guy into a second pairing role for potentially the next 1 to 2 seasons. I'm not going to say 3 seasons, but the next 1 to 2 seasons. I mean, I don't know. It's a risk. To me, it's a big risk. And we said it time and time again. Tyler Myers should not be your second pairing defenseman. And, there were some stupid contracts handed out yesterday, right? So Chris Tanev for 6 years. I love Chris Tanev, but 6 years is crazy. Zadorov at 6 times 5. I think that's an overpay for him as well. So, I mean, it's tough, but I don't love the fact that, like you said, Kyle, the Canucks are going to potentially roll with Soucy, Myers, Forbort, and Desharnais, who, again, there's Soucy, I think, has got the potential to be a number 4. He hasn't really proven it consistently, but when he's been healthy, he can do that for the Canucks. Yeah. But yeah, Myers, Forbort, and Desharnais, who are all kind of like the 5, 6, 7 types. So to me, it's a big flaw with the Canucks the way they're built right now. Is this defense on paper is not better than what it was last year, at the end of last season at least.
Yeah. And defense wins championships, and defense also elevates the floor of a team that still needs to prove that they can be consistent winners. Like, I'm not completely fooled that this team is culturally sound and structure is second to none and instinctful. Like, this team is still very much learning how to win, and it's a lot easier to do so when it's the simplest thing, but it's like getting your puck out of the zone, right? And
Yeah.
to further that point, I brought this up with Zadorov yesterday. It's like, again, we can't just discredit him completely for what he did in a couple of weeks. Like, when he's on and he's feeling himself, he was making plays too in pressure situations. And I brought up that play that he made in game 1 of round 2 against the Oilers, right? Behind his net. He just scored a goal. The crowd is buzzing. He has 2 forecheckers on them. He pauses. He stalls them. He makes them play his game. And next thing you know, this guy stretches a pass like 800 feet down the ice to Dakota Joshua. And next thing you know, Connor Garland scores a goal. Like, it's not all just about getting the puck out. Like, these guys that you have on paper allow the team to be not as efficient in transition. And for a team that needs to get better off the rush, those two don't connect. So there's work to be done. And Trevor, I feel as if we moved around these segments, right? Like, more moves for the Canucks happening. We're going to talk about this in segment 3. There has to be more. There has to be more. And whether it happened in the offseason or midseason, something's going to change. And one thing I do want to talk about, and maybe we can do this tomorrow. I think we should do this right away. Are the Canucks banking on a guy like Tom Willander to make noise in March or April next year?
We'll save that one for tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, let's save it for tomorrow.
Topic. We'll save it for tomorrow.
Because here's the thing, Trevor. Here's the thing. They want to make moves and they want to improve that position. A top 4 defenseman who might have to be, I don't know, right-handed, right? You're gonna trade Lekaramaki, Hoagland, or Willander to get one of those guys, or another first-round pick. And like, yeah, I don't want to go down that path for a team that has won once. Like, don't do it this offseason. I'm more comfortable trading guys like that or draft capital maybe halfway through next season if they've proven once again that they're a playoff team.
Yeah, I hear you. A couple of things to say about those signings, Forbort and Desharnais, is that, a big reason they brought them in is because they profile analytically as 2 of the best penalty killers in the league. Forbort, penalty killing specialist. Desharnais in the playoffs, Edmonton's PK was aggressive and they were fantastic. And I think Desharnais was a part of that, in fairness. I think, he showed some hands that Stone at even strength. But on the PK, I thought he was actually pretty good for Edmonton. So,
bro, he's bad. He's bad, bro. He's bad. The reason why they signed him for 2 years, and it makes more sense to me after what Allvin said, because again, he's bad.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know who's paying this guy 2 years for $2 million. Like, that's kind of Jim Benning-esque, to be honest. But since they believe he's a project player, I believe they're trying to do something similar like what they did with Dakota Joshua. So let's say Desharnais with Adam Foote and Sergei Gonchar does level up, and he does take huge strides during the season, and he is a number 6 defenseman or a number 5 defenseman. Because keep in mind, like, a lot of Oilers fans were mad that this guy left too. Like, maybe they see a little bit of potential in him as well. Let's say he reaches that, at least for another year when that OEL cap hit really hurts, they have him for $2 million.
Yeah.
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 So,
I like the Patrick Allvin mentality about him being a project defenseman. But yeah, I again, the fact that you already had Myers, now you have Desharnais, it's like, sure, they're big, but what else? I mean, I'm giving the Desharnais signing a C-. The Forbort signing, I'll give a C+. Again, 1 year, 1.5. Hard to hate on it too much. Again, they're pretty low risk signings. And for your Desharnais, Jimmy Benning comment, Desharnais maybe profiles a bit like Tucker Poolman, right? So, I mean, that guy got double the term that Desharnais did, in fairness. So, let's touch on the other signings quick before we get to break, because we're already we're pushing the half-hour mark, man. The ups are going to like it.
Let's do the rest on the other side. Do the forwards on the other side.
Okay, all right.
Okay, let's do that.
The rest of the signings on the other side, we'll touch on that, and then I'm going to touch on potentially more moves to the Canucks and how much cap space they have left. That's coming up on the other side here on Locked On Canucks.
People, we are back doing this, and that's giving you an episode of Locked On Canucks here at the Don't Doze Art Lab, man. Go check us out, don'tdoze.com. We taking care of our neighborhood, okay? For real. It's just the truth. Again, visit don'tdoze.com. Kyle Bound, Trevor Beggs. Going through all the signings again, it's been a whirlwind. It's only July 2nd. So many moves, so many changes. Like the Canucks were one of the busiest teams yesterday, okay? And can we touch on that a bit? For real, other than the forward news, nothing was leaking up until the Vancouver Canucks tweeted out what was going to happen, you know? So that tells me that, again, this organization is almost soundproof. Like they're professional. They're accountable. They're a team. They're a unit. They're in sync. So again, when Trevor and I were seeing all these signings and the DeBrusk one came out of nowhere, I think because again the Canucks run such a tight ship, and we didn't even hear that there was a connection between DeBrusk and the Canucks. It kind of like shocked us and it made us feel negative, right? It really did. In fact, I'll say this, and I still think this is the case. Like the fact that we signed Danton Heinen for that much only really made me feel better about everything that was going on with my emotions with Jake DeBrusk. Because I don't know about you, but I feel like this is an A+ signing. For 2 years, a lot more to prove here. He plays for the city that he's from, all this jazz. Like there could be a hell of a return on this contract.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's A+ for both these signings for me with Danton Heinen and Kiefer Sherwood. I think
Ooh.
Kiefer Sherwood for me was one of the most noticeable players in that series against the Vancouver Canucks. And, again, not the most talented player necessarily in the Nashville roster, but a guy who was always in on the forecheck, always causing chaos, always chirping, just a real hard guy to play against. And a guy who, has battled against the odds. I think he's 29 years old and he's played less than 200 NHL games, like spent a lot of time in the AHL. And last season, you look at his stat line, right? It was 10 goals, 27 points in 63 games, I believe it was. So, I mean, he's scoring at nearly a half point a game pace. And now he's signing a 2-year deal at, $1.5 million. Just a great contract. And I look at Danton Heinen too. And Danton Heinen, I think you nailed it, Kyle. He's been just a productive middle six defensively responsible winger for, the last few seasons, despite going on PTOs and signing late in the summer. Like this guy's just come in time and time again and just been nothing but consistent. I don't expect that to be any different in Vancouver. And I also think you have two guys in Heinen and Sherwood who can play up the lineup. If DeBrusk is struggling, if there's injuries, I think that you could see Heinen and Sherwood potentially, maybe not for a long stretch of time, but in top 6 roles next season.
Yeah, so I don't have the stats in front of me with Kiefer Sherwood, but there was like some Nashville Predators fan base or fan account that was tweeting out how, statistically speaking, he was like top 3, top 5 when it came to 5-on-5 offense or 5-on-5 offense generated on that team. Kiefer Sherwood. And Kiefer Sherwood, again, Quinn Hughes gives Patrick Allvin the phone call, not to congratulate him on Jake DeBrusk or Danton Heinen or Vincent Desharnais or Forbert. He calls him to let him know, like, yo, thanks for getting Kiefer Sherwood, because that guy was annoying to play against. Really annoying to play against. And I also heard on another podcast, I forgot who it was from. I think it was, anyway, somebody else said that Rick Tocchet specifically noted Kiefer Sherwood from that Nashville series as being a player that just never gives up. Never gives up. That hustle. All in all, the Vancouver Canucks, say what you want about their defense, offensively speaking, as a forward group, they got harder to play against. And, more specifically speaking, because effort is one thing, you need a bit of skill, they got a lot faster, in my opinion. Like a lot faster.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I feel like with how the roster is constructed right now, you might have the forwards making up for some of that lack of mobility on the back end there. If those guys can get the puck up the ice, it's like, dear God, get it to our forward so we don't have to skate. Because that's a pretty immobile back end with Myers, Susie, Forbert, and Desharnais. My God, man.
How is that even?
Times.
Dude, we're spoiled here. After 1 year, we're like, yo, this is not good enough. It's like defense is definitely still better than it was like 17 months ago. But yeah, no, I know. Just transitioning from Zadorov, who again could make a breakout pass, could even skate it out on his own, to not having like one of those guys after your number 3 defenseman is it's very scary, man. It's very scary. Like how are they going to fix Vincent Desharnais? Like how are they going to do that? Somehow, some way. Okay, got Hall of Fame talent across the board on that coaching staff. Something will give. Trevor, you want to talk about some more moves coming up for the Canucks? I want to get to some comments before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Got to remind the people, hit the like button on the episode, subscribe to the channel. Man, oh man, it's been a pleasure, man. It's been a pleasure. It really hit me yesterday, like in the morning when I was folding laundry and just watching Free Agent Frenzy. Like just to be here again and to care for a good hockey team and also just be passionate about the game of hockey again. I just feel blessed, and it has a lot to do with, again, everyone watching this or listening to this right now.
Damn, I was also folding laundry and watching Free Agent Frenzy, man. Two bros
Yeah,
think
we're in
alike, I
sync.
guess, eh?
Yeah, we look like the Sedin
Damn.
twins too. Come on, man. They taught us everything.
Yeah.
We act like them too, man. Come on.
Straight up. There you go. Okay, one last grade up free agency. Yuri Patera, Golden Knights goaltender, signs the Vancouver Canucks. A little competition, if you will, for Archer Shilovs.
Man,
I'm gonna
no
give that grade a B
competition.
plus. I like it because he's a younger goalie who's played some NHL games, who put up okay numbers behind a terrible Henderson Silver Knights team last season. So good signing there with Yuri Patera. For the Canucks cap situation, so I'm going to go under the assumption, because right now they have 23 guys on their roster without a backup goalie. So, one of Mark Friedman, Phil DiGiuseppe, Neil Zaman, Vasily Podkolzin could end up on waivers or dealt before the season starts, because someone's going to have to go to make room for a backup. We assume that's Archer Shilov. So I did some cap projections and an article for Offside Daily Hive this morning. And I
even with Tucker
Canucks,
Pullman on LTIR, that's gonna have to be the case. Like just the way it is. Damn.
Yeah, without Tucker Pullman, they'd have 24. So they're already at the 23-man roster limit with no backup goalie in the roster. So yeah, I'm looking at Freeman, DiGiuseppe, Amon, and Podkolzin, and one of those guys is probably not starting the season on the opening night roster. So I assume that Shilov signed a contract for, let's call it $975,000. That's about his market value right now, according to AFP Analytics. So if the Canucks sign Shilovs at 24, and I assume that they put DiGiuseppe and Mark Friedman in the Myers, the LTIR Tucker Pullman, they could have around $3.3 million of cap space with those assumptions I just said. So with that in mind, Kyle, do you think the Canucks make another move before the end of this offseason?
Dude, it's gonna be hard, man. I look, I'm not comfortable pushing more chips down for players that are not like 100% guarantee, like that's going to give you that's going to raise the floor going into next season without seeing the Vancouver Canucks again proven halfway through next season that they have learned their lesson. Like they are a winning team. Last year wasn't a fluke. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel as if good organizations move like that. It's been 1 year. This team's traded more draft picks than any team in the league. It's been 1 year already. You're going to trade more prospects? Look at what you gave for Lindholm. Like, it's hard for me to be okay with that. It really is. Now, the regular season is one thing. The playoffs are the other. I look at the star talent on this team. They got better as a forward group. You got Demko. You got Shilovs. Like, there's going to be a recipe for success there. I guarantee, like, there's a 90% chance this team's, going to be at the top of the standings halfway through the year. And if that's the case and they're a real contender again, let's take a real swing at a guy again that's going to be a guarantee in your top four. I feel as if right now in this wave in the offseason, like you're kind of taking a chance. You get what I'm saying? With whoever you pop into that position. That's just me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if any moves are going. I don't know if they can find that guy to be better than Tyler Myers right now. Real talk.
Yeah, slim pickings left on the free agent market. So, this was a team that signed Pius Suter in August 8th last offseason. But yeah, there's not too many attractive looking UFAs left on the market.
Are you comfortable with them trading? Are you okay with them trading more in the offseason, like a first round pick and Niels Höglander to get a top 4 D-man without seeing this team do it again? Like, are you 100% comfortable with the Canucks going all in again?
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking more so. I probably wouldn't make a deal like that this offseason. I was thinking more so like, is there another signing in place, or potentially they make a deal in September like they did with Tanner Pearson, Casey DeSmith. Like maybe there's something that shakes loose right before the preseason. But at this point, I'm kind of expecting Patrick Allvin to sit back, scratch his sack, and hopefully enjoy what was a pretty successful season there.
There you go. Okay, let's get to the comments before we get out of here. Kepner Canucks going with the projections on a Shilov's contract. Okay, Shilov's will get 1.5 to 1.8. Maybe if he signs for 2 years. Still a lot to prove. Now, this whole idea that this guy that we signed from Vegas is going to compete with Shilov's, like, dude, this guy was an NHL. Look at what Shilov's did in the playoffs. I want that guy getting 30 games a year. I do. Guy's a star. And bro, I'd like this guy to get more NHL ready. With his timing and how the game's different from the AHL to the NHL. Like, give him all that work next season, because I hate to do this, but you never know with Thatcher Demko, man. You never know. It. Like, it's important for Shilovs to start next year or, be the backup next season. Am I right on that, or am I just smoking the wrong stuff?
Yeah, no, I you're right. I think Shilovs is going to be the backup, But I mean, you got to have internal competition, right?
No,
And
I get it. I
you
get
know,
it.
it's easy for. No, I was gonna say I think most fans are caught up in how good Shilovs was in the playoffs, and
So
rightly
good.
so. But in the AHL, he was kind of average. And like I watched a number of AHL games, and I wasn't blown away by Shilovs during his regular season AHL performance. But come playoff time, he delivered when it mattered. So that is what matters most. But I look at Patera and I look at Shilovs, and I think they had very comparable seasons in the AHL last season.
Yeah, and competition matters, especially on this team. You can tell again they're run like a militant group. Like there needs to be competition internally, and again there needs to be a lot of professionalism. It's a beautiful thing seeing that the Vancouver Canucks, after missing out on Tanev and Gensel, still continue to bring players into their organizations who again get it, coached well, good like players from Nashville, Boston, New York, not New York, but you know what I'm saying? Like just that energy, just that energy. It's nice, man. It's nice. How about GV? Okay, gonna need some lineup projection, boys. It's too late into the episode to do that completely, but who plays with Elias Pettersson? Who does it, man? Right now, who plays with Pettersson, man?
I mean, I'm gonna say it's DeBrusk and Höglander because I think Allvin said that DeBrusk was gonna play with Pettersson, so I believe the boss man, and I think it's probably Höglander right now. So I'm gonna go DeBrusk and Höglander with Pettersson.
And how about this? Kurt Richardson saying I could see Heinen with JT and Brock. Dude, again, I've seen some Heinen highlights. Now he's playing for the hometown team. It's only on a 2-year deal. This guy's bounced around a lot when it comes to the contracts. I feel as if there's some inspiration here to put himself on the NHL map and get really paid. Because some of those contracts that we saw yesterday, bro, like Danton Heinen, put a couple more 20-goal seasons together with playing on the top line or 25 goals. You never know with the guy. Bro, you're going to be making $5 million a year. Holy moly, $1 billion spent yesterday. $1 billion.
1.2. 1.2.
Unreal. Anyways, let's
Crazy,
get out of here, man. Let's get out of here, man. Shout out to Jake DeBrusk. Next, JT Miller. Oh, my goodness, man. Later this week, we'll talk about Tom Willander more. I also want to talk about the whole Rick Tocchet, Jake DeBrusk thing that I got going on, okay? Because I feel as if those two are really going to get along. Anyways, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Discord link in the bio below too. Talk Canucks while on the toilet with a lot of good people. Again, link to that is in the bio. Beggsy, sign us out.
Hey, shout out to the everydayers, occasional listeners, first-time listeners, new subscribers, and those of you who joined us on the live show on YouTube. Don't matter when you're listening, where you're listening, we love each and every one of you. Lots more to get into, okay? The big part of the news is done with the Canucks free agent signings, but we got a lot to break down still. A little bit of a deep dive on DeBrusk, the other free agent signings, lineup projections, as Kyle talked about. Development camp now coming up for the Canucks are actually already underway.
We're not talking about development camp besides Tom Willander. Like, we're going to talk about a bunch of 6-rounders. Canucks
you can take the episode off. You can take the episode off, buddy. It's all good.
Okay, you do it, man. Unreal.
All right.
Man.
Speaking of taking off, we're taking off. I'm Trevor Beggs. That guy's Kyle Bound, and you've been listening to Locked On Canucks.
Yo, the Canucks prospect pool is so short right now that if you just taught your son, your 1-year-old boy, how to skate, he'd be a Canucks prospect just because he's from Vancouver, from this area. You know, that's how slim the cupboards are right now for your Vancouver Canucks, man.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On